Here we go. Lesson 26. Final lesson of EDTS 321. Woohoo! So this is lecture 3 of 3 on establishing a positive learning environment. So the last 2 lectures we've talked about sort of the root of classroom management, the root of creating a positive learning environment. We've looked at maybe some of the ways to prevent and manage issues in the classroom, whether from a preventative standpoint or reactive standpoint. Now we're going to look specifically at what your first day of school should look like and how you can establish some classroom rules in your future classrooms that actually might alleviate some issues. So here we go. Let's jump in. So the first day of school, this is from your reading. This is again Jennifer Gonzalez and Michael Linson in a Cult of Pedagogy podcast, or you could read the transcript. So 4 keys to start the year off right. Now, the reason why I want you to think about the first day of school is because the first day of school will dictate everything that happens the rest of the year. And it sounds sort of bizarre, but it's absolutely true. So how the students perceive you and your class and your course on that very first day will be part of how they look at your class and look at you for the whole rest of the year. I don't know if any of you have had a situation where you were in a classroom and then maybe your teacher, you had like one teacher for a week, so like Tuesday to Friday of that first week, and then for some reason that teacher was moved or things shuffled, and then you had another teacher for basically the second week of September to June. That second teacher is always seen as the replacement teacher. Isn't it a little bizarre? It's that sort of initial like bonding with the teacher that whoever they imprint on almost on the first day of school, that's who they believe is their teacher for the rest of the year. And how you set up your expectations and your classroom environment on that first day of school will dictate what happens the rest of the year. So here are some actual tips on how to start the year off right. So number 1, have an actual plan. So you might actually have, especially in your first year of teaching when you don't know the students coming in, you may actually want to have some classroom rules and consequences already planned out. Already kind of thought through what do you want for your classroom. And then you have to carefully plan and execute those you actually have to teach the kids those rules, some of them on that first day of school, because as you will live by whatever you set up on that first day of school for the rest of the year. You don't have to be like, these are the rules and this is how this classroom is going to go, but you do have to set expectations right away. Don't think, oh, I'll get to know them first for a couple weeks and then I'll set some rules. Have some overall rules, and we're going to talk about what those rules could be, and then you go after them there and there. Okay, then number 2, teach your plan or your rules. Actually teach them. Don't just go over them, teach them. So if one of your things is you have to line up at the door in an orderly manner without talking, whatever it is, then you actually practice that on the first day of school. And if they go nuts and all run to the door and push and shove, you're like, no, sit down, we're doing it again. And you have to then be consistent every time they line up at the door, especially for the first day, the first week, the first month kind of thing. You've probably heard the saying, don't smile till Christmas. I have. Part of me is like, it's absolutely true. And another part of me is like, wow, that's really severe. It's easier to loosen the reins than to draw them back in. So starting tougher than you think you need to be is probably better than starting easier, because if you start easier, it's really hard then to rein them back in. So, again, I don't smile till Christmas is kind of brutal, but the sentiment behind it of be tough and consistent. Kids want boundaries. I think when they have no boundaries, they will push until they find something. So if we give them clear boundaries and some consistency, actually it kind of just they kind of go, oh, because they know what they have to do versus always trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. Okay, so number 3, enforce like a robot. Now, this is a little bit of try not to get emotionally engaged um, in classroom misbehavior. You are the adult, you are the professional. It's hard. Let me tell you, I had many heart-pounding situations where I was really angry, like really angry. But you as the adult and the professional have to keep that under control and manage the student and the class at that point. So you try not to get emotionally engaged in those things. But on the first day of school, enforce like a robot, be consistent with your expectation on that first day. Okay, so right from that first day on, be consistent and enforce it like a robot. Don't give in. Even if it's your favorite kid, don't give in. Don't give in even if it's 2 days before Christmas. If they have not met your expectation, you must react. Okay? And sell your class. I think this is a little bit more for like junior high, high school, where they're coming sort of in and out of your class. But they should be excited about your class after the first day. Even here at the college, I always try to get through the course outline as quickly as I can so that I can get to more interesting things like getting to know you guys and, sort of seeing where you're at, which is why, I'm not sure if you remember, it seems like a long time ago, our first September class where I had to do those lockers. Right? So I could get to know you a little bit. And then I did go through the course outline, but I hopefully sparked your interest in the course. And again, you want to sell your course, but you want to be enthusiastic and excited about that class and your content in your course, but don't be goofy on that first day. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. I have a colleague of mine when I was teaching junior and senior high school. I taught junior and senior high for a while, and she was the drama teacher. So with her grade 8s, she decided that, she'd be the cool drama teacher, and then she would do this toilet paper game. So she actually, wrapped kids in toilet paper, and then they, led them around, and it was a fun thing. And then the kid said, well, can we toilet paper you? So she didn't have a relationship with these kids yet, but she's like, oh, I want to be the fun drama teacher. So she's like, sure. So they wrapped her super tight, and then she couldn't do anything, and they all just kind of stood back and watched her. And then she's like, okay, haha, okay, somebody let me go. And they're all just like, no. And I watched her struggle with that grade 8 class her entire year. Her grade 7s and 9s, she did not do that. She didn't do that. So she was okay with the 7s and 9s, but that grade 8 class never really had control over that class because of the interaction on that first day of school. So be fun, be enthusiastic, but be a robot about about whatever you feel is the foundation of your classroom and your classroom management strategies. Okay, so you may say, okay, yeah, I agree with all that, but I don't actually know what kind of classroom rules would I be implementing. Well, lucky you, because now we're going to talk about classroom rules. So here we go. Classroom rules must be explicit. They need to not be so many like sub points, but they need to be overarching enough that there are not a bunch of loopholes, but that you don't have, that a kid can't be like, well, I actually didn't do A and B, and the kid is actually right. So classroom rules need to be explicit. So like I was saying, I would come in with some teacher-created rules. So what are things that you can and cannot live without? And then combine it potentially with some student-created rules. And you can do this on the, I would, in your first couple years of teaching, I would come in with some teacher-created rules, and then maybe start to introduce student-created rules a little bit later on, once you really have a handle on how you want your classroom to run and you have a handle on the kids. However, if you decide to do student-created rules, the students actually usually come up with the exact same rules that you would want them to. So you might think, oh yeah, they're going to come up with things like, yeah, I can use my phone anytime I want, and I can eat, and I can walk around the room, and they actually don't come up with those. They actually are quite aware of what it takes to run a positive learning environment. So don't be worried that they're going to come up with really crazy things. They usually come up with the same rules that you would want them. The trick is, though, if you create rules with the students, then you have to go with those rules. If you just change them, the exercise really becomes kind of useless, and they end up being resentful. Because it's like, well, you asked us, and then you're not going to actually use them, and that is actually, you're going to set up a negative classroom environment instead of a positive classroom. You can definitely, as a teacher, contribute and say, I think that having a rule about respectful behavior is important, and then let them flesh it out. Or you can say, this is a rule that I must have, but then rule 2, 3, and 4, I want you guys to create. Okay. Rules, again, should be general. Things like respect yourself and others covers a lot of stuff in your class, and not too many. Like, don't have 1.A point subsection 1.22. You know, it gets too crazy. Respect yourself, respect others. Wow, you can do a lot with that particular rule. Okay, let's go now. Is classroom rules. I think rules kind of got a bad rap for a while in education. We were like, no, we can't have rules. We need to, these kids need to kind of be responsible and find those things out for themselves. But I don't really see them as negative. I see them as part of, anytime you have a group of people together, you are going to have rules. So, like, for you guys, the unwritten rule would be that you're not constantly interrupting me and collaborate, that you're respectful with your other colleagues, that you're participating. So we're living by rules all the time at college, so it would make sense that you would have some kind of rules if you were teaching elementary, junior high, or high school. Okay, so I'm just going to read, what is the purpose of mandatory classroom of a mandatory classroom rule, or what are the purposes? What is the purpose of mandatory classroom rules? That is not grammatically correct. Somebody help me here. Okay, anyways, when based on a foundation of all those things that we talked about, acceptance, love, care, supportive relationships, desire to optimize learning, promotion of students' social skills and self-regulation skills, then rules will help to set up a positive environment. When they are set up to control or manipulate, then we have some fundamental negative issues happening there. Okay, so we need to have some kind of guiding principles for every classroom that we are in, and some things, like I said, might be your hill to die on. Like, you're like, I must have this rule in my class, and then I'm open to other ones. So how should mandatory classroom rules be presented to students? What you can do is you can present some rules to students. So something like, we will not tolerate any disrespectful behavior in this class. And then the students can talk about strengths and weaknesses. How would they how would they actually change this rule, or are they good with this rule as it is? And let them debate about what they think of this rule and if this is a rule that they would want to adopt. So you can actually bring in, that's how I would start. Bring in the rules and then allow the students to have some dialogue on them. Okay, so in Collaborate, what you're going to do is, I want you to look at this rule, all our rules, as a potential classroom rule for you to take into your future classroom. All our rules will be fair and reasonable, and they will be democratically decided upon. They will be posted on the wall for everyone to see. They will be enforced with an appropriate consequence. So in Collaborate, we're going to have a chance to look at, is this a rule that you would implement in your classroom? So pick a level that you're probably most interested in teaching. So like Div 1, K to 3, Div 2, 4 to 6, junior high or high school. And then I want you to choose a side. Would you use this rule, and why or why not? And then we'll discuss in partners in Collaborate. So have some opinions, again, so that you can have a nice, rich discussion with your partner. Okay, we are also going to, in Collaborate, talk about these rules. So I want you to jot down a few ideas for all, I have 3 rules here, all 3 of the rules, and then in your breakout rooms, make sure when you go out, I'll remind you to do this, that you actually look at the number of the breakout room because you're going to be doing different ones. So again, what do you think of this rule? Would you implement it? Would you implement it in your classroom? And what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses? And how do you see elementary, junior high, and high school students reacting to a rule like this? So what do you think? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this kind of rule? And how do you think your level of students that you want to end up teaching would react to this rule? So number 1, students must be prepared for class. Only those students who complete all of their homework during the week will have no homework assigned for the weekend. A student who is not prepared for class must write a list of what they need for the next school day and have it signed by the teacher and parent. Okay, so discuss strengths and weaknesses and how students will react. Okay, so that's rule number 1. So do all of these rules so you're prepared to do any of them in Collaborate. Number 2, students must be on time for class. Each month, if there are fewer than 8 instances of students being late, the class earns the privilege of watching a movie during class time. Good old behaviorism. A student who is late must apologize to the class and stay in the classroom during the morning recess, if there's a morning recess. Or some kind of break. How about that? So if it's junior or high school, some kind of break. And number 3, this is a hot one. This is a good one. No cell phones allowed in the classroom. Students who do not bring their cell phones into the class may use them during the lunch break. If a student brings a cell phone into the classroom, the teacher will keep the cell phone until class is dismissed for the day. Or if you're a junior or senior high teacher, I would say at the end of the period when the child leaves, you give them their cell phone back. Again, strengths, weaknesses. How will the students react in here? Okay, so be ready to discuss one of the 3, but prep all 3 because you don't know which one you're going to be asked to talk about. Okay. Oh, this is just be ready to discuss possible rules you'd like to see. Oh, no, this is different. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself here. Then what I want you to do is be ready to discuss possible rules that you would like to see in your elementary classroom. So let's pull it tight to elementary. So if you were going to teach elementary, what would be a rule that you would have to have? It's a hill that you would die on. You have to have that rule in your classroom. I want you to wordsmith the rule. So jot down some ideas first, and then I want you to actually wordsmith the rule and be ready to write it on the whiteboard. So it should look like a rule, should look kind of like a rule like this, not just a whole bunch of ideas, but an actual wordsmithed rule. Okay, let's keep it focused on elementary classrooms so that we can have a discussion with a little bit more, with some more parameters in there. Okay, now I think this is super interesting. The whole concept, and this was one of your readings on restorative justice. Now this is a way of looking at punishment, but not as punishment. It's where if a child does end up doing something that is that goes beyond the rules. They break your rules. Instead of the concept of punishment, we look at what to do with that child as a consequence under the umbrella of restorative justice. And the main focus, the two kind of main ideas around restorative justice are: the focus is on repairing the harm for all parties involved, and it's not cut and dry. So let's flesh those out a little bit. So I'm just going to read you some definitions here of these two. So focus is on repairing harm. So say you stole a car. Instead of you necessarily doing jail time, really what you would have to do first is to make sure that you restore the situation to the person who you actually harmed, which would be the person whose car you stole. So you would have to restore that in some way. Either you'd have to get them their car back or get them a new car and apologize or something like that. Basically, the debt that you owe to society is to that person that you harmed. Okay, so it's not a you stole a car, you go to jail. It's you stole a car, now you have to repair that harm to that particular person that you stole the car from. And number two, it's not cut and dry. It is holistic and individual. So you have to figure out what makes things right on a case-by-case situation. So again, there are not these blanket, if you do this, A happens. It's if you do this, then we look at the case individually and we try to figure out how to restore justice. The foundations of restorative justice. So if you go, yeah, that sounds like a great concept, how do you actually go about setting this up? Well, you have to have these foundations. You have to have built relationships with your students. It has to be an intentional team building for all the students in your class and the teacher. And potentially, I know that this particular cult pedagogy one was looking at it as from a school-wide point of view, that it's a really intentional building of relationships as a whole school, which is really super cool. So again, when you intentionally build those relationships, there is definitely a classroom and potentially school environment that is super positive. Number two, we have to have a mindset shift. And I'm going to read again a little bit from these particular sources. Everything that a kid does shouldn't have to have a consequence. I mean, if a kid gets angry and says something to another kid and that kid gets mad, do they need detention for that? Or do they need to just fix the problem and not be mad at each other? Probably just fix the problem, not be mad at each other, and go on about their lives. If they didn't do anything wrong to the class or the community and they just did something messed up to another student, they can handle that between the two students. You could facilitate that. If it teaches them, hey, you have to be accountable for your actions, because your actions do have impact on other students without having them to sit in detention. Okay? So we don't need to be reacting to everything, but we need to be supporting the concept of restorative justice. So if you were rude or called a kid a bad name out on the playground, deal with it. Like, go and deal with it. This kid is mad at you. Go and figure it out. Versus you getting a detention for calling the kid a bad name, which actually doesn't really usually doesn't help the child who called the bad name, and it doesn't make the child who received the bad name feel any better. So a mindset shift. Circles. Actually creating a physical circle in your class with your students. Back to that sort of the indigenous idea of the healing circle. Absolutely is when you can see each other and you're sitting in a circle that is whole with no beginning and no end, there's something profound about that. And so if we can use actually physical circle time as a foundation for supporting restorative justice, it works really, really well. We want to also identify biases and triggers. We need to recognize that we have biases and triggers as well as our students have biases and triggers. And so if the same child keeps coming to us and they're always the ones that are pushing other kids on the playground, and we're kind of tired of it. We have to, again, check our bias, try to go, okay, what's really going on with this child, and can I come at it from a restorative justice point of view versus just a straight up punishment point of view. We want to build culture and community. So as a foundation to restorative justice, if the students feel known and at home at school, generally behavior on a whole will be better if they really feel like they belong and that they are important to you. And number 6, discipline. We are, as humans, I think we want retribution and discipline for something that we feel is a slight against us. And again, I think we have to shift that mind shift. So again, I'm going to read this to you. The answer to this is complicated because it's not as simple as detention, suspension, expulsion. There are conferences and circles, a lot of discussion about the harm that was done and how it can be repaired. Individual decisions are made on an individual basis. I really do believe that restorative justice is the direction we need to be heading to create safer, healthier school communities. So we need to get past that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of attitude and get into the how can I be preventative and set up a classroom environment that supports each child, and if a child messes up, how can we actually teach them how to deal with that instead of just punishing them. Okay, I think it's a really cool concept. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to this PDF. This is your Medicine Hat College. These are your rules that you are being governed by right now as an MHC student. I want you to scroll down to section 5 to principles, and I want you to, what do you think of these rules that you are governed by at MHC? We're going to do this and collaborate. Is there anything you would like to see here or would like to see taken out? And is there any restorative justice in these rules? Is there equality in these rules? Okay, so I have also just put them here if you don't want to go. It's kind of interesting to go to the full document so that you can see what rules we have here as a college. And I want you to specifically look at the principles here and think about it from all you know now about setting up a positive learning environment and in the light of restorative justice. Okay, again, you've seen this before. Effective classroom management. Why I spent 3 lectures on this is because effective classroom management results in positive student behaviors, enhanced student psychological security, and better teaching and learning. That's what we're aiming for, and so that's why I spent so much time talking about sort of overarching ideas and then down to really specific ideas. Okay, so now you made it through the course. Congratulations! Woohoo! We made it through. You made it through one of, I think, the craziest semesters that I have ever had as an educator at any level. Congratulations. It was a bit of a go. Hopefully you learned a lot about yourself as a learner and that you learned just how resilient you can be, how you can learn in different situations, and hopefully how inspired you are to be an amazing future teacher. Awesome. Excellent work. You made it.